Hello everyone, tonight we are crouched low in the underbrush watching a creature the size of a city bus prepare for what might be the most dramatic sneeze in the history of Earth. Its nostrils quiver, its feathery crest vibrates, and then boom, a burst of air-wet particles and what appears to be a shimmering cloud of blue-green mist erupts into the morning air. You flinch. Of course you're human. You assume sneezes are gross, but this one glitters in the light. It shimmers like a gasoline puddle, and then it vanishes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because here it's always prehistoric o'clock. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along behind the beast. Let's call her Luma because naming things makes this less terrifying, and try not to breathe too deeply. The particles are still suspended in the air, refracting beams of early sunlight like a soap bubble from hell. The scent is oddly floral. Or maybe that's just your brain trying to give the cloud a shape. You hold your hand up into the mist and it clings briefly to your fingers. It's not just moisture, it's sticky oily even. You wipe your hand on your shirt and pretend this isn't the weirdest moment of your week. Luma's tail swishes through the ferns. She's a Corythosaurus famous for her helmet-like crest, but not at all famous for sneezing like a rainbow sprinkler. Yet here you are. Her sneeze wasn't just dramatic, it was colorful. And as bizarre as that seems, you're now stuck wondering why. Let's walk it back, literally. You tread carefully along her path past crushed conifers and burst mushroom caps following faint mucus drips that glow just a little in the shade. There's no doubt about it, something's been added to her respiratory output. Something decorative, purposeful. You blink. What if dinosaurs sneezed in color the same way some animals today flash colors for communication? Let's talk about cephalopods for a second. Yes, octopuses. Because modern octopuses can shoot ink that has not just color but enzymes, even pheromones. Some squids use a kind of mucus-laced ink to confuse predators with glowing distractions. So maybe Luma's sneeze isn't that weird after all. Maybe it's just evolutionary baggage in the most fabulous form. But Luma's a land animal, right? What could possibly be the use of a neon-colored sneeze on land? You dodge a branch and trip slightly because Luma has taken a sharp turn. She's heading for a mineral lick, a salty outcrop, where her kind likes to snack and socialize. And as she joins a cluster of her kind, you notice something striking. Some of the others sneeze too. Not all of them. Just two others. One's a juvenile with a pale pink mist. The other, an older male with a sneeze like rusty gold. None of them seem to notice each other's sneezes. But maybe that's just you. Or maybe they are noticing in some subtle ancient way. Historians still debate whether certain behavior patterns in dinosaurs were evolutionary leftovers from more chemically expressive ancestors. We're not talking about talking in colors exactly, but some paleontologists have proposed that display mechanisms didn't always have to be visual structures like feathers or horns. Sometimes they may have been expulsions. Temporary, reactive, and biochemical. And here's the part where your eyebrows go up. Modern reptiles and birds. Yes, birds, because dinosaurs are birds with better PR, have mucus and gland systems that can produce enzymes, pigments, even mild toxins. In some birds, preen glands produce substances that change color over time. In reptiles, cloacal glands release strongly scented and often colored substances during courtship. So if you imagine a world where seasonal allergies were evolutionarily useful, you might just begin to understand Luma. Also, odd fact, time sloths sometimes grow algae in their fur, giving them a greenish hue. It's not defensive, not intentional, but it's functional. What if mucus worked the same way? The thought makes you shiver, but you lean into it. What if the vibrant sneeze wasn't just a byproduct, but a feature? You see a predator slink by at the edge of the clearing, maybe a Dromaeosaurus. Not close enough to be dangerous, but close enough to watch. And that's when one of the younger Corythosaurs emits a short, almost musical sneeze, spraying orange mist sideways into the grass. It smells sharp, almost like chili. The predator hesitates, then it turns and slinks away. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe that sneeze isn't just expelling irritants, it's sending a message. I'm not food. I'm irritating. Go sneeze yourself. There's a soft moment of stillness after that. The herd settles. Luma lowers her head and rumbles softly, her breath echoing through her crest like a didgeridoo. It vibrates into your bones. You take a deep breath carefully this time and sit down in the dirt. From here, everything feels surreal. If dinosaurs sneezed in color, then mucus wasn't just bodily waste, it was communication, performance, maybe even camouflage. There's no proof, of course. Not yet. But you've seen enough to believe there's a reason to look. As the sun rises higher and the sneezing slows, you take out your journal, the one you swore you wouldn't use for field notes, and scribble just 2 words, rainbow snot. It's not exactly academic, but it might be true. You follow Luma's herd through the fern-thick valley, watching the colorful mist dry on the undersides of leaves. It leaves behind nothing but a faint shimmer and an idea that refuses to leave your brain: chemical warfare. Not the drop a nuke, and hope kind, more like perfume as a weapon or a sneeze that makes your enemies cry. You glance at the juvenile again, who's now stomping happily in a shallow pool, and wonder if their dazzling sneezes had a deeper purpose, maybe defense, maybe drama. Corythosaurs weren't alone in their mucus mastery. Across the plains and forests of the Cretaceous, other species, pachycephalosaurs with domed skulls, horned ceratopsians, even the occasional sneaky raptor, were all part of an ecosystem not just built on tooth and claw, but also chemistry. It wasn't all about the bite. Sometimes survival was about what you could leak. You stumble upon a patch of recently trampled brush, and you catch a whiff of something acrid like burnt lemon rind and wet hay. It makes your eyes water. You crouch and spotted a sticky puddle, viscous and weirdly purple, clinging to a clump of broken stems. Something had sneezed here, recently, and powerfully. You rub your nose. It's burning now, just a little. It brings to mind the modern bombardier beetle, which sprays boiling chemical-rich liquid from its abdomen. Or the skunk, who doesn't bother with violence when a reeking fog will do. If these creatures can weaponize fluids, who's to say dinosaurs couldn't? And if some of them sneezed out colored smelly mist, it might have served to startle a predator or signal danger to others. Historians still debate whether these kinds of chemical defenses existed in larger vertebrates of the Mesozoic, but plenty argue that the line between respiratory function and chemical defense wasn't always so strict. After all, you've got modern birds with oil glands that make them waterproof, reptiles that bleed from their eyes as a scare tactic, and frogs that ooze psychedelic slime. The evolutionary menu was always a bit chaotic. You step away from the puddle and the burning fades. In the distance, a pair of armored ankylosaurs waddle through low fog, their tails twitching. One lets out a huff, not quite a sneeze, more like an irritated exhale, and from its nostrils a fine yellow mist sprays out and settles. A few seconds later, a group of smaller scavengers, probably a flock of soror Nitholestes, peels away from the scene, coughing and flapping their wings. Okay, now you're convinced. This isn't just coincidence. There's something in that mist. You pull a makeshift rag from your bag, cover your face, and creep closer. The ankylosaur huffs again, expelling another cloud, and this time you see the effect more clearly. The scavengers actually trip over themselves to get away. You can't help it. You grin. Not because it's funny, although one of them definitely faceplants into a bush, but because this changes so much. Chemical warfare in the Cretaceous wasn't limited to plants. This wasn't just flora using toxins to keep herbivores away. The animals were in on it too, weaponizing breath mucus and all the wet gooey bits evolution gave them. Of course, not every species needed it. Your mind drifts to the big names T-Rex Giganotosaurus, who didn't have to sneeze in color to be terrifying. They had jaws the size of minivans, but the smaller guys, the ones who couldn't outrun or outfight their predators, they had to be creative. And maybe, just maybe, turning their mucus into something bright, bitter, or blistering gave them a fighting chance. Odd fact of the day, some horned toads squirt blood from their eyes. It's not mucus, but it's close enough. The point is, fluids can frighten. And don't forget about the fish. Hagfish release slime that expands rapidly in water so sticky it can choke predators. You probably won't find any hagfish equivalents in this dusty canyon, but the principle remains: if it sprays and burns, it can save your life. You sit down on a fallen log, or at least what you hope is a log and not some prehistoric root beast. Around you, the air is finally starting to clear. The mist is gone, the scavengers have moved on, and the ankylosaurs, satisfied that they've staked their claim on the muddy wallow, start munching peacefully. There's something beautiful about how violence in nature can be soft-edged. A sneeze, a cloud, a shimmer, and yet utterly effective. You scribble another note in your journal: missed teeth. But don't get too comfortable. The sound of wings overhead alerts you to another development. You look up and see a Quetzalcoatlus. Yes, one of the big pterosaurs circling lazily above. Its wingspan casts massive shadows across the clearing. It doesn't land, but you notice that even from up there, it sneezes. A flash of bluish fog sprays sideways from its elongated beak, catching the wind and drifting toward the trees. You're not sure what's more terrifying: the fact that the largest flying animal in history just sneezed from the sky, or that it might be doing it on purpose. You imagine a predator lurking in the canopy below, watching, ready. Then suddenly a sneeze rolls in like pepper spray from the clouds. Not a bad tactic. You look down at your shirt, still stained from Luma's earlier burst of glitter goo, and sigh. If this is what dinosaur warfare looked like, it's way messier than expected. You wake up to a sound that can only be described as a honk, chirp, splatter. And before you can even sit up properly, you're coated in a fine mist of turquoise. It smells faintly of citrus and iron. You blink rapidly and wipe your face on your sleeve again. Welcome to your third sneeze encounter before breakfast. The culprit is a Protoceratops with a face like a brick wall and a sneeze like a malfunctioning paint sprayer. She trots off unfazed, leaving you with a new theory to chew on. Maybe it's not just about defense. Maybe it's pigment. Pigment into the mucus. You feel gross even thinking the phrase, but here we are. Modern biology shows us that many animals produce pigments through specialized cells called chromatophores. In cephalopods, chromatophores help change skin color in real time. In reptiles and birds, pigments determine everything from feathers to scales to weirdly festive throat sacs. So what if, bear with me here, some dinosaurs evolved pigment-producing glands, not just for external display, but for internal, expression? Imagine chromatophores leaching into sinus tissues, mixing with mucus, and voila, Technicolor sneezes. Historians still debate whether pigment-related cells could have appeared in soft tissue linings, but several fossil records suggest surprising flexibility in where these cells showed up. Feathered dinosaurs like Anchiornis preserve traces of melanin patterns, and even some preserved skin impressions hint at more complex coloration than we once assumed. Now imagine that complexity turned inside out. You hike toward the riverbank, boots squelching through wet loam, trailing pigment puddles like you're on the set of a prehistoric art film. The trees above drip from last night's storm. Every leaf seems coated in dried spatter from various sneezes, some teal, some rust red, others a brownish green that honestly doesn't make you feel great. You glance up just in time to see a juvenile oviraptor sneeze mid-climb. Its nostrils twitch and then it launches a brief pressurized puff of purple mist onto the bark. The color sticks. A beetle that was crawling across the surface abruptly jerks and tumbles off twitching. You squint. Pigment and toxicity. That's ambitious. You laugh softly to yourself. The idea that mucus could be layered like a dessert from hell with pigment enzyme and chemical irritants is horrifying and incredible. You imagine a predator trying to ambush something only to get sprayed with tie-dye acid, like some kind of Jurassic rave gone wrong. And while we're at it, did you know some species of nudibranches, aka flamboyant sea slugs, can eat toxic prey and repurpose the toxins into their own slime? That's right. Eat poison, store poison, weaponize mucus. Suddenly, a colorful sneeze doesn't feel so far-fetched. Odd fact of the hour, flamingos are only pink because of the carotenoids in their diet. No carotenoids, no color. So, if some plant in the Cretaceous diet contained vibrant pigments or pigment precursors, it's entirely possible those chemicals showed up in ways we wouldn't expect. Like, through the nose. You crouch beside a pile of regurgitated plant matter. Don't judge, it's important, and notice flecks of deep indigo suspended in the glop. There's no sign of blood, just vibrant coloration. Whatever this dinosaur ate, it stained everything. You poke the sludge with a stick and watch it cling stringy and resilient. Then a breeze carries a faint vinegary scent past your nose, and you take an instinctive step back. You're starting to get the bigger picture now. Pigment in mucus isn't just plausible, it might have been practical. Think about it. Bright colors signal toxicity, territorial boundaries, or sexual readiness across the animal kingdom. If sneezing let you project those signals into the air without wasting energy on physical combat or posturing, that's evolutionary gold. And let's not forget that humans too can express pigmentation internally under rare conditions, chromadrosis. Anyone. That's when people sweat and color. It's real. Uncommon but real. Now take that phenomenon, stretch it back 100 million years and let it evolve in weird directions. Congratulations, you've got rainbow-sneezing dinosaurs. Of course, not every species would have done this. Some just blew snot like professionals, but others were show-offs. You pause as you reach the river. A wide stretch of brownish water winds through the clearing, and you spot movement upstream. Two parasaurolophus, their long crests gleaming in the sun, dipping their heads to drink. One suddenly rears back and lets loose a spectacular sneeze. It arcs high like a geyser shimmering in the light green gold and flecks of crimson. The other doesn't flinch. Instead, it raises its head and answers with a low, bassy rumble from its crest. This might be flirting or a turf war, or both. Historians still debate whether the elaborate nasal structures of these dinosaurs were solely for vocal resonance or also for regulating temperature, or for producing unique signals like this. But now, standing here soaked in other people's biofluids and surrounded by what might literally be prehistoric sneeze graffiti, you're leaning toward all of the above. You jot down more notes. Sketch the river bend and watch the mist drift downwind like colored fog. The water catches bits of it. Yellow trails swirling lazily in the current. You wonder if it leaves any mark on the fish or the amphibians. Is the whole ecosystem tinted by dino mucus? You shake your head. This is absurd, but also absurdly beautiful. The sound it makes is somewhere between a cough and a belch followed by a string of slurps that could ruin soup for you forever. You peek out from behind the dense foliage just in time to witness a hadrosaur, a chunky, flat-beaked fellow chewing up a massive cycad cone and slobbering all over its roots. The sheer amount of goop pouring from its mouth makes you gag a little. It's not elegant, it's not efficient, but it is educational. This beast is multitasking, eating, and making a mess, yes, but also laying the groundwork for our next mystery. Because what you're really witnessing isn't just bad table manners. It's the merging of spit and snot in prehistoric culinary design. You stay low and inch forward. The hadrosaur's snout drips with viscous saliva flecked with crushed vegetation and the occasional insect leg. As it chomps away, a glob of mucus bubbles out of one nostril, dangles for a suspenseful second, then pops and splashes across a rock. The blob shimmers faintly greenish, maybe blue, and you stare like a mesmerized raccoon discovering glitter. Why does this matter? Because this intersection of saliva, mucus, and color might be the missing link. You see, it's possible that dinosaurs used nasal discharge and drool not just for digestion or excretion, but for interaction. Historians still debate whether saliva had semiochemical functions, meaning it could carry hormones or signals similar to pheromones. In mammals today, it often does. And in some reptiles, saliva isn't just a lubricator, it's mildly toxic, sticky, or bitter. In Komodo dragons, it's a bacteria-laced soup with consequences. You sidestep a log and examine the rock splatter closer. The outer edge is already crusting into a jewel-toned residue. It smells faintly metallic like licking a battery, and the closer you get, the more your eyes sting. You blink rapidly. That's not just spit. That's active chemistry. Back to the hadrosaur. Now it sneezes, yes again, and you see a kaleidoscopic ripple through the mucus stream. It's not as dramatic as Luma's sneeze back in the clearing, but it confirms a growing suspicion in some dinosaurs the boundaries between nasal fluid and saliva weren't hard borders. They were more like shared systems. What entered the mouth and what exited the nose may have been filtered through similar biochemical gates. Odd fact, sea lions use mucus to trap fish. Not chew, not snap, trap. They whip their heads and fling snot to create sticky water corridors. Why wouldn't a dinosaur pull a similar trick on land? You step back as the hadrosaur starts making guttural, satisfied noises. Think, lawnmower chewing bubble gum. It burps, flaps its throat pouch gross, and lumbers toward a nearby stream. As it dips its head, you notice the clear difference in its behavior. Snot is reserved for one type of plant, saliva for another. Maybe it's instinct, or maybe it's evolved specificity. Because some compounds in prehistoric plants, especially cycads, were poisonous unless neutralized with enzymes. You glance at your journal and scribble snot as pre-digestive filtration, and then circle it twice. As you rest beneath a fern canopy, trying not to breathe through your nose, you remember something from last week. A story about hippos. Their sweat isn't just pink, it's antimicrobial. It's literal sunscreen, liquid armor. That's sweat, not mucus, but in evolutionary terms, it's all just bodily ooze finding a niche. What if dinosaurs evolved similar defenses not just from sun or predators, but from their own lunch? And here's the kicker. You pass another plant partially eaten and the leftover leaf edges have turned violet, where mucus touched them. Not brown, not black-violet. Like there's a reaction happening right in the plant tissues. You don't touch it. Not because you're cautious, though you should be, but because you've already learned that nothing from a dinosaur's face should be taken lightly. You crouch beside a tree and watch, as a smaller hadrosaur, maybe a juvenile, approaches the same cycad and imitates the elder's behavior. It doesn't eat right away. Instead, it sniffs, then sneezes, then drools, then eats, like a recipe. You imagine some ancient dino mother teaching her young step 1, slime it. Step 2, chomp it. Step 3, don't die. Now we're talking about cultural transmission, aren't we? Historians still debate how much behavioral learning occurred in dinosaurs. Did they teach? Did they mimic? Was it instinct or observation? If mucus rituals were passed down generation to generation, you're looking at more than biology. You're looking at culture, fluids with meaning, slobberous tradition. That's not something you'd find in a textbook. But here, watching snotty adolescents mimic their elders, you believe it. You believe in sneeze-based heritage. The sounds around you shift. A breeze rustles the canopy. Somewhere, something calls out three sharp bleats and a low growl. It's not directed at you, thankfully. But the hadrosaurs freeze. The juvenile lets out a warning cough, wet and sharp, and the air is suddenly filled with a new kind of mist. Not colorful this time, just thick, dense enough to obscure outlines. You watch as the herd quietly backs into the deeper foliage, camouflaged by their own mucus cloud. And you realize the line between digestion and defense is thinner than you thought. You walk away slowly, one hand over your face, wondering whether any of this would fossilize. Probably not. Soft tissues dissolve, fluids evaporate, but the behavior that might leave a mark, if not on the bones, then in the fossilized patterns of trampled, discolored ground. Maybe even in the oddly stained sediment layers we keep misidentifying as iron-rich. Maybe all this time we've been walking on the remains of 1,000 forgotten sneezes. You're not sure what wakes you. You first the oppressive humidity curling against your skin or the gentle staccato of sneezing echoing off the canyon walls. Either way, you're up, and the air is already thick with yellow haze and floating bits of what looks suspiciously like prehistoric pollen. You breathe shallowly. Even the plants are acting weird. Today, the problem isn't the dinosaurs, it's what they're breathing. You duck under a low-hanging branch that's vomiting golden spores. The stuff coats everything, your clothes, your eyebrows, your journal. You're a walking clump of sneeze fuel, and judging by the chorus of honks, wheezes, and snorts in the distance, you're not the only one. This valley, lush, warm, and aggressively floral, is the prehistoric equivalent of allergy season cranked to 11. The source: gymnosperms. You'd think in a time before flowering plants took over you'd be safe, but no. Cycads, ginkgos, conifers. All of them have mastered the fine art of botanical blitzkrieg. Their pollen doesn't need to be attractive, it just needs to be everywhere. And right now it is. You take a few careful steps toward the clearing and spot a group of ceratopsians. Triceratops probably snorting violently, stamping the ground, shaking their massive heads like they've each got a horn jammed in the wrong sinus. Their sneezes aren't as colorful as Luma's, but they're powerful. Clouds of dust and pollen swirl with each exhale, catching the sun in dramatic bursts. Odd fact time today: the cedar tree is one of the most allergenic plants on Earth, but it's got nothing on what you're seeing now. These dinosaurs are moving through pollen so dense it looks like fog. And as they inhale, their bodies react with mucus, with mist, and maybe, just maybe, with pigment. Historians still debate how sensitive dinosaurs were to allergens, but the theory is gaining traction. After all, reptiles and birds both show clear allergic reactions today. Iguanas can get sinus infections. Chickens sneeze. Why wouldn't their massive ancestors suffer the same indignities? One triceratops lets out a particularly aggressive sneeze, and the burst carries bits of amber-colored goo 10 feet into the air. It spatters against a tree trunk and begins to drip slowly, then faster, until it forms a puddle at the base. It smells like crushed pine needles and old leather. You can't decide if it's awful or kind of pleasant. Nearby, a smaller dinosaur, probably a juvenile. Thescelosaurus ambles over and begins sniffing the goo. You expect it to recoil. Instead, it dips its snout in and starts making a soft clucking noise. Then it sneezes. A pale green mist bursts out, fine and almost frothy. It blinks, shakes its head, and trots off looking invigorated. You raise an eyebrow. Allergy-induced? Sneezing, sure, but shared allergy mist. That's new. You scribble a note. Community exposure, immune sinking. You draw a tiny doodle of a dinosaur with a giant tissue just to keep morale up. The air shifts. A low breeze swirls pollen clouds toward the river. In the golden fog, silhouettes blur and bend. You think you see a pair of hadrosaurs wading into the shallows, but it's hard to tell. The sun turns the haze into molten light, and for a moment, it's beautiful, like standing inside a cathedral made of dust and dandelions. Then something sneezes behind you, hard. You duck just in time as a blast of orange mucus sails over your shoulder and splatters against a boulder. The smell hits first sulfur vinegar and wet dog. You gag. The source, a snub-nosed ceratopsian with runny eyes and twitching ears, snorts again and stomps its feet. This isn't just allergy, this is a reaction. Maybe even a warning. You recall that certain animals today, like tree frogs and some lizards, can secrete irritants through their skin during high pollen seasons. It's thought to help clear their systems or fend off opportunistic infections. Could this dinosaur's mucus be both an allergic sneeze and a chemical signal? You back away carefully, trying not to agitate the already overstimulated beast. A small flock of feathered theropods flits by above, sneezing softly like pigeons with hay fever. Their mist catches the light as they swoop, leaving trails of pastel vapor in their wake. You've officially entered the sneeze jet stream. Your journal page is already sticky. You jot down one more note, pollen, as signal amplifier. You underline it, then sneeze yourself. Great, you've been pollinated. Historians still debate whether gymnosperm blooms triggered migratory shifts in dinosaur populations. It's possible that some species moved to higher ground during high spore periods, not to chase food, but just to breathe. If sneezes were colorful, they might have also helped others identify safe versus dangerous zones. It's not a stretch. Think of it like ancient traffic lights. Red means danger, green means safe-ish, purple means don't even think about it. You push through the trees toward a ridge and look down on the valley. It's a glittering haze of pollen and color shimmering like a heat mirage. The sneezes come in waves now, small ones, big ones, coordinated blasts of mist and sound and scent. It's a chorus of discomfort and defense of communication through bodily chaos. And just for a moment it hits you. Maybe dinosaurs didn't just sneeze to survive. Maybe they sneezed to speak. Night falls heavy and warm, the kind of prehistoric dark that smells like fungus and old sweat. You camp at the edge of a nesting site, not too close, not too obvious, just near enough to observe. A few faint rhythmic chirps cut through the gloom, but otherwise it's quiet. Too quiet, until the nest starts glowing. It begins as a soft pulse, faint greenish, barely there, but it builds. The scattered mounds across the clearing give off the same flickering radiance like a cluster of forgotten lanterns buried in the dirt. You lean forward, squinting through the underbrush. And that's when you see it. The source of the glow isn't the eggs, it's the mucus. Thick strands of it are webbed around the nest edges, strung between sticks and stones like spider silk laced with moonlight. You shuffle closer. Every cautious step squishes underfoot. The ground here is wetter, richer, and a little too alive. And you can smell it now, that distinct, sweet rot of bacterial bloom. It's not unpleasant, just active, breathing, biological, bioluminescence. It's rare in modern land animals, but not unheard of in the water. Firefly squid, anglerfish, certain fungi even glow. And bacteria. Oh, bacteria love to glow when given the right cocktail of nutrients, moisture and warmth. Mix those conditions with prehistoric mucus, and suddenly the glow makes sense. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had symbiotic relationships with microbes, but in this moment, kneeling next to a glowing, snot-webbed nest, you're starting to think they didn't have a choice. The stuff is everywhere, and it pulses in rhythm with the night sounds like the land itself is breathing in light. You reach out with the tip of a stick and lift a string of the glowing slime. It stretches, clings, and holds its shape stronger than it looks. And for a moment, it seems to respond to the motion. It pulses brighter. Odd fact, in some bioluminescent marine worms, light emission increases when disturbed. It's a warning, a signal. I'm here. Back off. What if this mucus does the same? One of the adult dinosaurs, a squat, wide-bodied ankylosaur, approaches the nest. It doesn't touch the glow directly. Instead, it huffs over it, letting a warm breath pass across the strands. And just like that, the light dims. Subtle, deliberate, coordinated. You're not watching a glow stick. You're watching a conversation. You write thermal cues, plus mucus equals dimming response. You draw a little diagram. You immediately regret the diagram. Suddenly, a juvenile stumbles into view, sneezing wildly. A burst of pale blue mist sprays from its snout and lands directly on a glowing strand. The mucus sizzles faintly. The light flares, then flickers out. You blink. The strand dies. That's new. You step back unsure whether this is harmless or wildly toxic. But the ankylosaur doesn't react. No charge, no snort, no tail swipe. Just a quiet rumble, like approval. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a contribution. You whisper aloud, bioluminescence, plus immune response. Your voice sounds ridiculous, but out here, who cares? No one's grading your sanity. Think about it. A sneeze might not just be a symptom, it could be a delivery system. In this case, a mucus packet containing bacteria or enzymes that interact with nest materials. Maybe to prevent infection. Maybe to light the place up. Maybe both. The mucus could be like a nightlight / antibiotic / sneeze-based graffiti tag that says, "I was here. This is safe. My baby lives here." It's not even the weirdest theory anymore. You settle against a fallen log and watch the clearing pulse with soft green and yellow hues. It feels like sitting inside a giant jellyfish. There's something oddly peaceful about it. You see more adults moving among the nests now, sneezing gently onto key points, refreshing the glow, reinforcing boundaries. None of them sneeze in bright colors this time. Just soft, dim hues, like glowing breath. Historians still debate whether nest care in dinosaurs was truly complex. But with each careful sneeze and pulsing light, you see intention. This isn't instinct, it's stewardship. And if bacteria are involved, that's a coevolutionary partnership. Odd fact, too, there are microbes in your own sinuses that fluoresce under UV light. The glow is faint, but it's real. Maybe the bacteria weren't just tolerated, they were invited. The juvenile returns and lays down near the nest, its nostrils still wet, chest heaving gently. You watch its sides rise and fall, and with every exhale, a faint puff of glowing mist escapes. Not violent like before, just calm, rhythmic, synced with the ambient pulse of the slime strands. Maybe it's like heartbeat music. Maybe this is what a lullaby looked like in the Cretaceous, bioluminescent mucus, gently breathing in time with the herd. The image makes you sit back humbled and a little weirded out, but mostly humbled. You scribble lullabies made of snot. Underline once, then laugh. The nest lights dim slowly as night deepens. One by one, the mucus threads lose their glow, fading into darkness like stars winking out, but the silence isn't empty. The sneezes are still there, fainter now, tucked into sleep like the sound of an ancient world clearing its throat before dreaming. You wrap your blanket tighter and close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, another gentle mist huffs into the air. You feel it drift across your cheek. It smells like eucalyptus and ozone. You wake before dawn, your nose crusted with prehistoric night breath, and your dreams still echoing with the image of glowing mucus threads. The forest around you is quiet, but not still. There's movement just beneath the canopy, a whisper of feet, a shuffle of tails, and now a new sound, a hollow resonating hum that seems to swell inside your chest before your ears can catch it. You stand slowly and scan the horizon. There, cutting across the fog like a shadow made of brass, is a Parasaurolophus. Its long, curled crest juts back from its skull like a decorative horn, which, as you already know, is not just for show. The low, trumpeting hum grows louder with each step it takes. but then it sneezes. You flinch, not because of the sneeze itself. Okay, partly because of that, but because this one isn't like the others. This sneeze sings. The mucus is ejected in a long, arcing spray that shimmers silver in the low light. But the sound, it reverberates. It echoes through the crest like a pipe organ with a cold. Historians still debate whether those hollow nasal tubes were used primarily for vocalization, thermoregulation, or mating displays. But now, watching this, you wonder why not all three? Maybe they weren't just tools for song. Maybe they were part of an entire respiratory performance system. You creep closer as the Parasaurolophus lifts its head again and breathes in slow, controlled bursts. The air cools as it enters the crest, then exits with a sigh, carrying a faint mist barely visible this time but definitely pigmented. Pale pink, faintly iridescent. You swear it changes color depending on the angle. It's not just mist, it's mood. The dinosaur isn't alarmed. It isn't sick. It's communicating. Odd fact, in modern elephants, low-frequency rumbles can travel long distances underground, and those calls change slightly when the animal is agitated or excited. Combine that with mist, and suddenly Parasaurolophus is a whole mood board. You crouch and try to sketch what you're seeing. Not just the dinosaur, but the shape of its crest. The arcs of the mist, trails. The way its breath hums the air into visible waves. The colors are soft rose lavender, even a glimmer of pale gold. This isn't a warning, it's a serenade. Another Parasaurolophus appears from the brush. Taller, broader, with a more prominent crest. The first sneezes again, a gentler burst this time, more mist than mucus. The second responds with a similar release. Their fogs mix mid-air, swirling into a shimmering spiral of pastel hues that hover and twist like smoke from an incense burner. You whisper, display behavior through aerosol interaction. Then chuckle. It sounds ridiculous, but the evidence is floating right in front of your face. Historians still debate whether these dinosaurs had a specific language of sneezes or if the behavior was more generalized. But here now, you watch a courtship or a challenge unfold in clouds of scented colored mist. Not just seen, but heard and felt. It's theater, and they are both the orchestra and the fog machine. And now, a third Parasaurolophus arrives. No greeting this time. This one charges forward, lets out a bone-deep honk, and unleashes a sneeze that explodes like a fire extinguisher, white, dense, furious. The fog smashes into the pastel spiral, ripping it apart. Everything shifts. The other two back off, heads low, crest rumbles quieted. You hold your breath, unsure whether you're about to see a clash of horns or a chemical cold war. But instead, the first Parasaurolophus lets out one last low-frequency sigh. A fine thread of emerald green mist spirals from its nostrils, hovers in the air, and slowly fades. The challenge is acknowledged. The territory yielded. No contact necessary, just sound, mist, and color. You exhale slowly. Somewhere in your notebook you scrawl, respiratory display, equals conflict resolution. This goes beyond sneezing as defense or infection. This is performance. Pageantry. Mucus as message. Odd fact again. Some hummingbirds, those feathery air blenders, can produce infrared flashes during certain maneuvers. Not visible to human eyes, but clear signals to rivals. Could Parasaurolophus have emitted particulate signals that shimmered in non-visible spectra? Maybe ultraviolet, maybe even thermochromatic. You look at the fog trails lingering in the cool air. As the sun rises and the temperature shifts, the mist changes again. The pale pink becomes almost blue. You blink. Was that heat-based color response? You remember thermochromic ink, that kid's toy that changed color with your thumb. And you wonder if dino mucus ever worked the same way, formulated to respond to environmental changes. Mist as a mood ring. You want to test it. But your test kit is rudimentary. A hand, a rock, a breath. You crouch by a newly fallen glob of pastel goo on a leaf. You breathe on it. Nothing. You touch it. It warms. The hue shifts from gold to red. You freeze. You do it again. Touch. Wait. Shift. You write furiously. Temperature-reactive pigment in nasal excretions, possible nonverbal group coordination tool. The implications are wild. Imagine a herd where color-coded sneezes aren't just sick sneezes. They're how the group communicates temperature danger, or mood, or readiness to migrate, or mating viability, or emotional state. You step back and just look. 3 dinosaurs, 3 trails of fading mist, and a forest holding its breath. You can't tell if what you're watching is science or art. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're doing something beautiful. With their faces, with their breath, with whatever evolution threw into their sinuses. And somehow none of it feels absurd anymore. You wake sweating. Not from fear, not from the nightmare of drowning in rainbow snot, though. That was vivid, but from the oppressive, sticky heat pressing against your skin, like the inside of a giant dinosaur's mouth. It's barely mid-morning, and already the air feels like a wet blanket that's been microwaved. Everything here is sweating, hissing, radiating warmth. You aren't alone. A familiar figure stumbles through the ferns up ahead. Luma. Her gait is slow, deliberate. Her skin glistens. Her tail droops low. And from her nostrils, twin plumes of mist billow with every breath. Not loud sneezes, not warning sprays, just soft, steady puffs like a living humidifier on legs. And you start to wonder, could these colorful nasal emissions have served a different purpose entirely? Thermoregulation. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had active internal temperature control like birds and mammals, or relied more on their environment like reptiles. But the evidence suggests something complicated in between. Some dinosaurs might have done both, used behavior and biology together, like you wearing a tank top and also dunking your head in a fountain. You follow Luma through a shady gully and notice how each exhale leaves a trail of mist that shimmers in the light, pale orange this time tinged with tiny flecks of gold. It doesn't smell dangerous. It smells warm. Faintly herbal, like chamomile and pine sap. It lingers briefly, then vanishes. It's beautiful. And strange. And if your suspicions are correct, intentional, you find a high ridge and crouch to watch the valley below. There, among a cluster of ferns and slow-moving sauropods, you see it happening again. A dozen dinosaurs of different species and sizes, all exhaling visible plumes from their nostrils. Not violently, not dramatically, just releasing heat into the air through colored mist. And here's the thing. Their colors aren't the same. One lets out silvery vapor. Another emits a smoky blue trail. A third sneezes out something almost clear, but with a faint, oily sheen that dances in the light. It's as if their breath is coated like living mood rings floating through the forest. You scribble in your journal, pigmented sneezing as cooling and signaling system. You pause to wipe sweat from your forehead. The sun is rising higher, and the heat is becoming unbearable. You're sticking to your own journal pages now. You remember that in some birds, beaks and legs help regulate heat, blood vessels dilate, releasing warmth into the environment. In mammals, we sweat. In dogs, panting. But what if for some dinosaurs, the sinuses became a multi-use exhaust system? Expelling both heat and pigment-laced mucus in response to rising internal temps. You creep closer to a cluster of herbivores gathered around a watering hole. They're all standing motionless like statues. Except for one, a thin-necked dryosaur who's pacing, breathing heavily. Its breath paints the air with an amber haze. You can actually see the difference between relaxed and overheated. The others release only faint, colorless puffs. This one, it's practically glowing. Odd fact of the day, certain amphibians release stress hormones through their skin when overheated. Some change color entirely. What if dinosaurs had a similar response, not external, but aerosolized? And now you're thinking about mating displays. Because as soon as the dryosaur calms, something fascinating happens. A second one approaches and lets out a soft sneeze, barely audible, but the mist is bright pink. They stand close, mists mingling, heat rolling off their flanks. And then they synchronize. Their breaths match. Their colors stabilize. This might be courtship, or it might be advanced thermoregulation in pairs, maybe both. With dinosaurs, it always seems to be both. You take another breath, immediately regret it. The air is now a hot soup of dino breath pollen and the unmistakable aroma of steaming plants. Everything is cooking. You move along the edge of the clearing, watching how different dinosaurs behave in the heat. A pachycephalosaur snorts, occasionally releasing orange mist in bursts like a pressure valve. A trio of juvenile oviraptors has climbed into the crook of a tree, breathing in slow intervals, exhaling light purple clouds as they rest. And then Luma again. You see her by a boulder, nostrils flaring, crest trembling slightly. This time the mist that exits her is dark. Deep burgundy, almost wine-colored. It clings to the air for a moment, then falls low and heavy before dispersing. You shiver, not from cold, obviously, but from the way the air seems to shift around her. The temperature feels cooler, slightly. You hold out your hand. Where the mist had passed, there's condensation on a rock. Tiny droplets clinging like morning dew. You run a finger through it, cool to the touch. No way. Could these sneezes be cooling the immediate air? It sounds ridiculous, but then again you're surrounded by 30-ton lizards using their heads as humidifiers. You write in all caps, sneezes equals personal air conditioners, and circle it 3 times. You remember the term evaporative cooling. Birds do it. Humans do it. Even kangaroos lick their forearms to cool down. So maybe dinosaurs had their own system, mucus evaporating from nasal spray pigments, added not for show but as stabilizers or chemical enhancers. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs were warm-blooded, cold-blooded, or somewhere in between. But here you're watching a third option, self-modulating, social, subtle, a sneeze that cools you down, communicates your status, and maybe impresses the neighbor all in one exhale. Now, that's efficiency. As the sun climbs higher and the sneezing slows, a hush falls over the landscape. The air clears. The mists vanish, and one by one the dinosaurs lower their heads, step into shade, or dip themselves into shallow streams. And you lean back against a tree, drenched, exhausted, and just a little enchanted. You never thought you'd be this emotionally attached to nasal emissions. But here you are, fanning your face with a notebook and hoping someone sneezes on you. For the cooling, obviously, not the bonding. Though, at this point, who can tell the difference? You think you've adjusted. You think you've seen the worst of it, the sneezes, the slime, the heat, the glowing mucus threads. Nothing can surprise you now, right? Wrong, because now you can smell it. You're moving through a low-shaded gulch when it hits you. A scent so strong, so complex, it practically tackles you. It's sharp, then sour, then suddenly sweet, like someone dropped a rotting durian into a vat of bubblegum and set it on fire. You stagger, eyes watering, and instinctively cover your nose. And then you hear the sneeze. You duck behind a tree just as a massive theropod, maybe a juvenile tyrannosaurus or something, close lets out a deep, congested bark. A mist blasts forward from its nostrils, but unlike Luma's or the Parasaurolophus serenade, this one's not about beauty. This is about presence. The cloud is dark, nearly black. It coils through the air like ink and water and carries with it an olfactory slap that clings to your sinuses. The dinosaur snorts again, almost like it's reloading, and you watch other creatures in the area visibly flee. Small ornithopods bolt into the underbrush, Even a squat ankylosaur trudges away tail low. You don't move. Because your brain is catching up to a new grotesquely beautiful idea. What if these sneezes weren't just visible, but scented? Historians still debate the extent to which dinosaurs relied on olfactory communication, but many modern animals do it. Skunks, obviously, but also foxes, deer, rhinos. Some use glands. Others use urine. Dinosaurs. They might have used the nose for more than just breathing, maybe for expressing dominance, danger, or desire. And it makes sense. In a world before language, smell is the oldest signal. It cuts through noise. It lingers. It means something. You skirt the edge of the clearing following the fading mist. The air still reeks, but it's bearable now. And you notice something else. The dinosaur has rubbed its snout along several tree trunks, leaving behind a tarry streak of what you now recognize as concentrated sneeze goo. Marking territory. Classic. But this isn't your average skunk spray or wolf pee. This is multi-channel. There's scent, color, even texture. The trail is black, yes, but flecked with iridescent blue, and it dries into a tacky, almost crystalline substance that catches the sunlight. Odd fact, binturongs or bearcats smell like buttered popcorn. Their scent glands produce a compound called 2-AP, the same stuff that gives cooked rice and toasted bread their smell. If mammals can smell like snack food, is it so strange that a dinosaur sneeze could smell like scorched fruit punch and engine grease? You crouch beside one of the marked trees. There's an almost geometric pattern in how the sneeze stripe curls like a coded signal. Not just I was here, but maybe don't come closer or find me if you dare. And then you hear it another sneeze, from farther away. Not a roar, not a call, a sneeze. Quieter, higher pitched. The big one turns. So do you. Because now this isn't just chemical warfare or scent camouflage. This might be dialogue. The new sneeze is laced with a sweet, almost cinnamon scent. The mist floats slowly, shimmering faintly red. The two clouds drift toward each other, colliding like rival perfumes in a crowded elevator. The effect is immediate. The larger theropod huffs, lowers its head, and slinks into the trees. Surrendered? No blood? No violence? Just an aromatic showdown. You scribble furiously in your notebook. Scented sneezes as passive communication, chemical negotiation. It's wild, but not impossible. Think of honeybees, ants, wolves. Smells shape everything. Fear, hunger, rank. Even humans, yes, you have apocrine glands that quietly broadcast how stressed or excited you are. Subtle chemicals waft through the air, unnoticed but powerful. Why wouldn't evolution refine that into high-performance mist? And that brings us to another wrinkle mating. You follow the red-scented cloud back to its source. A lithe, long-legged dinosaur, possibly a raptor or dromaeosaur, crouched low in the ferns. It pants softly, mist still curling from its nostrils. Then it gives a low, almost playful sneeze, short, bright, and fragrant. And almost immediately another appears. This one doesn't sneeze right away. It approaches carefully, nose twitching, testing the air, like a sommelier detecting vintage. Then confirmation. It exhales gently, misting a faint rose-colored fog. They circle. They sniff. They sneeze again. The air grows thick with sweet, spicy, almost floral haze. You don't need a degree to recognize a flirtation when you see one. You jot a final note. Scented sneezing, issues, pre-courtship, scent sharing. You're starting to think these creatures weren't just visual marvels, they were olfactory symphonists. Communication through chemistry encoded in pigment and smell. What began as respiratory response might have become social currency. You look up as the two raptors vanish into the trees, their scent trail lingering like a prehistoric love letter. The wind carries it away, blending it into the rich perfume of ferns, fungus, and distant rain. And for the first time today, the air doesn't smell like a challenge. It smells like connection. You're halfway up a rocky slope knee-deep in ferns when you hear it, a loud, wet cathok from below, followed by a chorus of groaning snorts and sniffling bellows. It's a familiar sound now, but it's the volume that makes your stomach drop. You peer over the ridge. The gorge is full of ceratopsians. Not just a few, dozens, maybe more. Triceratops, Chasmosaurus, maybe a Styracosaurus or two. Massive bodies lumbering shoulder to shoulder, moving slowly through the mudhorns, slicing through vine-thick undergrowth. And every few seconds another sneeze. They echo through the canyon like trumpet blasts filtered through soup. It's chaos, but organized chaos. Because while the sneezing is loud, there's no panic, no stampede, just a shared rhythm of congestion. This isn't a battle, it's an outbreak. You crouch squinting down through the shifting haze. The air is thick with mist both from the dinosaur's breath and the humid conditions. You feel it in your own chest, a scratchy edge that wasn't there yesterday. The scent is strange too, like overripe melon and wet iron. You already know what that means, infected mucus. Historians still debate how respiratory infections spread among herds in the late Cretaceous. But today, you're witnessing it firsthand. A viral sweep carving through this valley like a sneeze-driven wildfire. One juvenile Triceratops stumbles. Its breath comes in shallow bursts. It sneezes, sprays pale yellow mist onto a nearby boulder, and immediately collapses next to it. The others keep moving. No stopping. No caretaking. This isn't a nurturing moment. This is biological triage. You pull your shirt up over your nose and begin taking notes. The mucus patterns are distinct. You count at least 3 different colors, yellow-green, which hangs heavy in the air, a rusty red which dries quickly on surfaces, and a thick pale blue fog that disperses almost instantly. Each one likely signals a different stage of infection. Odd fact, in modern-day elephant seals, infected individuals sneeze out clouds that carry active pathogens which others can detect chemically, sometimes from a distance. Certain immune cells can even smell infection. If that's true for mammals, why not dinosaurs? A huge Styracosaurus lets out a congested honk. Its nostrils flare with effort. The resulting mist is marbled yellow and red together, not a good sign. It huffs, turns abruptly, and walks away from the group. Self-isolating. You stare, not because it's surprising, but because it's smart. Maybe not conscious human-style decision-making, but instinctive social distancing. That tracks. Birds and reptiles today exhibit similar behaviors, moving away when sick, isolating in dense environments, sneezing less when close to kin. Could sneezing in color have helped? Imagine a visual marker, "Don't come near me," written in pink vapor, or "I'm still contagious" in foggy green. A prehistoric warning label that said, "Avoid retreat, protect." You write in your journal, "Mucus pigmentation, icky, visual biohazard marker." You're so deep in thought you almost miss the shift in tone. The herd has stopped. A low bellow echoes through the canyon, long deliberate. It's a call, not a cough. The other ceratopsians respond by stepping back, forming a ring around one of their own, a massive matriarch, with a cracked horn and tired eyes. She lifts her head, exhales slowly, and then sneezes. But it's not the kinds of sneeze you're used to. This one is purposeful, controlled, and colorless. Just clear mist, fine as dust, rising gently into the air and hanging there. The others lower their heads. The infected individuals, as if on cue, move to one side of the valley. The rest keep to the other. It's a sneeze that means something. A command. A ritual. A separation protocol. Historians still debate the possibility of non-verbal leadership in herding dinosaurs, but what if scent and mist were part of that hierarchy? Not roars, not fights, but nasal symbols. Signals coded in chemistry. You scramble down the slope carefully, slowly, until you're close enough to see the ground. There are mucus stains everywhere. Each rock, each patch of moss, each crumpled bush bears splashes of colorful residue. Some glow faintly in the low light, others have crusted into brittle flakes. It's not pretty, but it is organized, like maps, like signals, like ancient respiratory graffiti. You pass a sapling covered in drying yellow mist. Bugs avoid it. Flies dart in, then retreat instantly. Whatever's in that sneeze, it's potent. And now you're wondering if this outbreak didn't just happen randomly. What if it was managed? What if the herd has been doing this for generations? Recognizing mist patterns, steering around hotspots, keeping the sick separate from the young. What if sneezing wasn't just a symptom, but a system? You reach a spot where 3 paths cross, each marked with a different mucus splatter. Red, blue, yellow. You crouch, reach out your hand toward the blue, and feel a breeze shift toward you. You stop. Let it settle. The mist clears, the path is silent, and then a small ceratopsian calf steps into view. Alone, eyes watery, nostrils raw. It looks at you for a second and sneezes. A tiny cloud of purple mist floats out and dissolves instantly. You stare. That's new strain, new response, or a whole new type of signal. The calf turns and wanders after its herd. You just stand there, dumbfounded, in a gorge where colors hang in the air like flags on a battlefield. But no one's fighting here. They're just surviving. With style, with mucus, with communication so old it never needed words. It's later now, later in the day, later in the season, maybe even later in the fossil record. The air feels heavier, like something has changed, though you couldn't say exactly what. A wind kicks up across the flats, sending curls of dust across your boots. You squat beside a ledge and peer down into a shallow ravine dotted with sediment layers. Some shimmer, others look cracked and ancient, and one in particular catches your eye. A wide, fan-shaped splatter in the rock, spiky at the edges, rippled near the center, like something hit here, fast, wet, and strangely purposeful. You ease down the slope and crouch beside it. The shape isn't natural, it's directional. A burst, a splash frozen in time. Fossilized sneeze. Historians still debate whether such a thing is even possible. Soft tissue rarely fossilizes, and fluids like mucus are even more elusive. But there are rare exceptions. Impressions trace fossils' residue layers locked in mineral-rich clay. Maybe, just maybe, what you're staring at is the prehistoric equivalent of a sneeze shadow. The color of the rock is different here, darker, slightly greenish, not from moss, but from something embedded in the mineral. You run a finger gently along the edge. The grooves ripple outward in a pattern that screams biology. You pull your notebook, flip past the doodles and theories, and sketch what you see. A central burst. Fanned projections. Faint particles visible in the sediment grains. And around the edges, tiny oval shapes. Not seeds. Spores. You blink. This isn't just a sneeze, it's a moment. A dinosaur sneezed here violently while standing near a patch of mold or fungus, and the force of it scattered spores across the ground. Some settled into this muddy basin. Then time pressure and luck did the rest. Odd fact, some frogs sneeze with enough force to eject parasites from their nostrils. It's not just about expelling mucus. It's ecosystem maintenance. What if this ancient blast was doing something similar, ridding the respiratory system of contaminants, while leaving behind the oldest forensic evidence imaginable? You scan the rest of the sediment layer. More patterns. More ripples. Not all the same. Some are rounder, some more linear, like streaks or dribbles. Others are perfectly contained circles, as if the sneeze dropped straight down vertical impact. Different species, different shapes, you scribble again. Sneeze morphology species signature. This could be groundbreaking. If sneezes had distinct shapes, they might have left a signature as recognizable as footprints or tooth marks. An entire category of trace fossils we never even thought to name. You hear a low trill behind you and glance up. A pair of small feathered dinosaurs, maybe troodontids, are pacing just beyond the ledge. They sniff the ground, circle a few exposed rocks, and sneeze in short, rapid bursts. One of them's nose is stained a faint lavender, probably from eating something questionable. Each sneeze kicks up a little more dust, and one leaves behind a wet blotch on a flat stone. You mark it fresh splatter, directional, glossy. Maybe this is how it started with moments like that. Thousands, millions of them, most lost to time, but a few catching just the right matrix, the right minerals, the right stillness. You lean in closer now, examining another patch. This one's different, less radial, more drippy. The central point has streaks coming away thin and snaking like drying honey. And then you see it, a single feather fragment trapped in the layer, nearly dissolved, but still identifiable. It curves gently with the flow of the ancient mucus. There's history here. Not just of a sneeze, but of who sneezed, how violently, where they were standing, what they were breathing. You start imagining an entire field, paleomucology, fossilized respiratory behavior as a diagnostic tool. Maybe that sounds ridiculous, but honestly, what about this journey hasn't? Historians still debate whether dinosaur behaviors could ever truly fossilize beyond bones and burrows. But you're seeing now that behavior leaves echoes in the most unexpected places. Not just in structure, but in residue. You remember how archaeologists once mistook prehistoric cave smudges for careless accidents until someone realized they were fingerprints. Maybe these snot patterns are the fingerprints of breath. The sun slips lower in the sky. Shadows stretch across the ravine. You trace one final splatter near the base of the slope, larger than the rest, with an odd curving edge. Not a sneeze, perhaps. A cough. A dribble during feeding. You don't know, but it's there. And that means something sneezed, lived, and moved on, and left part of itself behind. You close your notebook gently and stand, brushing dust from your knees. The wind picks up again, swirling loose sediment into little spirals. You watch the dust dance, wondering how much of it carries remnants of ancient moments, microscopic echoes of mist, pigment, and breath. You take one last look at the fossilized splatter before climbing out of the ravine. You whisper, "Bless you," to the past, and mean it. The next place you find yourself is far less dry, far more feathery. You're crouched in a damp, densely forested stretch of undergrowth that smells like moss bark and something distinctly musky. Above you in the lower canopy, the forest flickers with movement. Birds? Not quite. They're feathered, yes, but larger, raptor-shaped, lightly built, and unmistakably ancient. Anchiornis, maybe? Or a similar genus. You don't bother with names anymore. You just listen. Because the forest is sneezing. Short, soft bursts echo between branches. One there, psht, another from above, chksh, and another right behind you, startling enough that you nearly fall over your own feet. You spin and catch a glimpse of one, a juvenile, twitching its snout, feathers puffed. It lets out a dainty, almost involuntary sneeze, and a cloud of orange mist spirals from its nostrils. You watch it drift light as pollen catching the light through the trees like embers rising from a fire. Feathered dinosaurs sneezing in color. You should be used to it by now, but you're not. This time, though, the focus isn't on the sneeze, it's on what follows. The bird-like creature fluffs its feathers, and you see it. The same hue. Orange, with hints of green along the fringes. The mist matches the pigment in its down. Not perfectly, but enough to make your eyebrows twitch. Could it be he? You step carefully forward, watching as it hops off a branch and lands lightly beside another of its kind. They nuzzle beaks briefly. One sneezes. The other mimics the motion a second later. Their mists hang in the air, and then settle invisibly onto their already vibrant bodies. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs groomed like birds do using oil or dust to maintain feathers. But what if mucus-colored pigmented chemically active was part of the toolkit? Not just defense, not just communication, but feather maintenance. You remember that in modern birds, uropygial gland secretions help waterproof and protect feathers, and even carry antimicrobial properties. What if instead of relying solely on back-of-the-tail oils, some feathered dinosaurs used sneeze spray, built-in, pressurized airborne conditioner? Odd fact. Flamingos feed their chicks with crop milk, a secretion so rich in carotenoids that it stains their feathers. For weeks, the adults turn pale while the chicks get pinker. So if sneezes carried pigment, maybe they also influenced appearance over time. You observe more carefully. One of the older creatures, slightly duller in feather tone, sneezes onto a nearby rock. The discharge is pale, nearly translucent, but within seconds it oxidizes, darkens, and shimmers faintly blue. You watch as the juvenile sidles up, rolls its neck across the stone, and picks up the stain like it's perfume. This is deliberate. This is ritual. You write feather dying via nasal secretion and underline it so hard the pen almost tears the page. And what about camouflage? As you trail deeper into the glade, you notice subtle differences in feather hue across shoulders, necks, tail fans. Some blend with the tree bark. Others match leaf litter almost perfectly. Could sneezes have played a role in reactive coloration? Maybe temporary enhancements that change during the season or even during courtship. You don't need proof, you're watching it happen. A pair of anchiornithid-like creatures circle each other in midair. They sneeze, not loud, not showy, but consistent. The clouds are purple, fading quickly. Their feathers shimmer slightly when hit with sunlight. Not full color change, but enough to matter. You jot another line, nasal pigments in mating display. Because, of course, it's always about mating. But here's something unexpected. One creature sneezes, and nothing happens. No mist, no color, just a dry, wheezy puff. The others freeze, then slowly, subtly begin shifting away. You stare. That's rejection. That's exclusion. And you get it. Because if colored sneezes mean vitality, fertility, dominance, what does it mean when your sneeze fails to shine? It means weakness. It means goodbye. One last odd fact for the road. Some birds today can literally see UV reflectivity in feathers, using it to judge the health of a potential mate. If feather color and mucus pigment were linked, that ability might have extended to sneezes' two short-term aerosolized beauty filters. You whisper to yourself, they sneeze to impress, and maybe also to survive. Because it wasn't just about love. If pigments helped signal strength, then lack of pigment meant vulnerability. And in this world, vulnerability didn't last long. You step into a clearing where the sunlight punches through the canopy, and you see it hundreds of tiny droplets hanging in the air. Mist from a dozen different creatures. Orange, purple, gold. A cloud of competitive breath. A kaleidoscope of respiratory prowess. The whole forest is vibrating with scent and shimmer. Not a battlefield, not quite a mating ground. Something in between. And you realize feather and fog, fluff and fume, none of it separate. The sneeze and the feather are one and the same. One colored the other. One meant nothing without the mist that shaped it. You close your notebook, not because you're done, but because there's no space left. You look up at the canopy-feathered forms darting between the shafts of light, sneezing like symphonies and blending into the background like ghosts. You wonder how many scientists miss this by looking down instead of breathing in. You smile, you cough, and for the first time you hope it's nothing. The weather turns without warning. One moment you're squinting through tree-filtered sunlight, The next, you're drenched in shadow as a bank of clouds rolls across the sky like a thick wool blanket. The wind shifts, the trees go still, and the smell hits you before the first drop lands, wet bark ozone, and something deeper fungal earthy, alive. Then it begins, a slow, patient drizzle that quickly evolves into a downpour. The forest breathes it in. So do you. And so do the dinosaurs. You're back among the underbrush keeping low beneath a broad-leaved plant whose name you'll never know, watching a herd of dinosaurs react to the weather like someone flipped a switch. Their movements shift less, grazing, more huddling, heads lower, breaths faster, nostrils flare. Then comes the first sneeze. It's loud, wet, green. A flash of mist bursts from the nearest dinosaur's snout and is immediately swallowed by the rain. Another follows, this one brighter, almost lime in tone. And then it starts in earnest, a rolling wave of sneezes, not from panic, not from fear, but from the rain. You lean closer, scribbling furiously. Rain-triggered sneezing. Weather sensitivity. Historians still debate the impact of Triassic and Cretaceous climate systems on dinosaur behavior. Monsoons, seasonal drenchings, fungal blooms. All of these could have affected breathing. And today, it's undeniable precipitation isn't just weather, it's a biological switch. Rainstorms could have flushed spores from trees. Disturbed underground mold colonies. Carried microbes through the air. If modern humans develop sniffles from weather shifts, how would a 30-foot plant eater respond with nostrils the size of teacups? The answer: with force. You duck as a juvenile sneezes right in your direction. The mist is yellow and cloudy. You cover your mouth not because you're scared of infection. Well, okay, maybe a little, but because the air around you now hangs thick with sneeze fog, clinging to raindrops like perfume in a storm. And now, something new emerges, a scent. Not one, but many. Each sneeze has a smell: sharp, spicy, moldy, floral, burnt. It's as if the rain didn't just wash the mucus into the open, but activated it. Like water struck some kind of chemical trigger, and suddenly, you're surrounded by a living, breathing kaleidoscope of scented mist. You step back, trying to breathe shallowly. Odd fact: when certain lichens get wet, they release volatile compounds that were locked during dry periods. Some emit bitter or even antiseptic scents, driving animals away. Could dino mucus have worked similarly? Could it have changed properties when rained upon? You wipe your nose. It's running now, too. Great! You're catching paleontological hay fever. You spot a stegosaur trudge past, tail swinging lazily, exhaling long strands of mucus that stretch and break between its beaked lips. It doesn't seem alarmed, just uncomfortable. But its sneezes are different. Thick, slow, purplish blue. They don't drift. They sink, settle, stick. You crouch beside a boulder as a hunk of that purple slime lands and quickly spreads in the rain, forming a slick surface that somehow resists washing away. It darkens the rock, then strangely bubbles faintly at the edges. You do not touch it. But you do write down water-reactive mucus, possible microbial bloom. And then beneath that, seasonal rain equals a mucus trigger, ecological consequences. Because it's not just the dinosaurs reacting to the storm, it's the ecosystem. Insects scatter, some collapse mid-flight. A few amphibians flee from puddles not toward them. A cluster of moss wilts where green sneeze landed moments ago. That's when it hits you. What if sneezing wasn't just an individual response? What if during certain seasons whole herds synchronized? A kind of respiratory event, a purge. A ritual of dripping, misting, expelling, not because of a virus, but because of weather. Spores, pollen, airborne irritants washed loose and inhaled all at once. A storm sneeze. You imagine a monsoon rolling across the plains, thunder shaking the ground, and miles of sauropods and hadrosaurs exhaling pigment scent and enzyme into the fog. A sky filled not with rainbows, but sneeze bows, arcs of colored mist flashing briefly before dissolving, terrifying and magnificent. You watch as the Dinosaurs cluster closer, not just for warmth but for protection perhaps. Their sneezes are quieter now, denser. Rain thickened. The colors don't spread, they cling. To leaves, to fur, to each other. Some begin rubbing against one another, smearing scent-sharing mucus. It's not gross. It's ritual. Maybe part immune sharing, part social cohesion. Like sneezing together says, we're one herd. We're still here. Odd fact. Vampire bats, yes, really share saliva during grooming, not just to bond, but to swap antibodies. Could dinosaurs have done the same through mist and mucus? The rain eases. You watch the air clear. The scents fade. And now the sneezing stops. One by one, the dinosaurs lift their heads and shake. Rain flicks from skin and feathers. The ground now slick with colored puddles, and mucus patches shimmers faintly. The forest exhales. You're soaked. Sore. But oddly, at peace. Because you saw something that will never fossilize, never leave a mark in stone, never get written on a museum plaque. A shared ritual of breath and rain. The sneezes of survival. The air after the storm feels new, emptied, scrubbed. You walk through a clearing still speckled with puddles and glistening fern fronds, each footstep a soft squelch of ancient mud. Birds. Actual birds flutter overhead, now distant cousins of the giants you've been tracking. They chirp. One sneezes. You flinch. Instinct. But this morning feels different. Today you're not here for the storms, the pigments, the pollen, or even the mucus. Today you're watching for the moment evolution flexes its weird, unexpected muscles. You're waiting for the sneeze that meant something more. The herd is smaller than usual, only 5 or 6 individuals grazing along a misty riverbend. They're early hadrosaurs, nervous little things alert and agile. You watch them from a high ridge as they chomp lazily on river plants. The light is golden, the world is calm, until the noise. A rustle too sharp to be wind. One of the hadrosaurs snaps its head up. Another freezes mid-bite. Then you see it movement in the trees. Low fast practiced, something watching. The predator is quiet, sleek. Feathered, probably a dromaeosaur, and it's waiting for the right moment to strike. You can see it gauging the wind, the angle, the noise level. It inches closer. And then, as if on cue, one of the hadrosaurs sneezes. Hard, loud, red. It explodes out of its nostrils like a flare, a burst of mist so bright and startling, it makes you jump. The effect on the others immediate. The entire herd bolts. Legs flash, tails whip. The colored mist spreads just long enough to give everyone their trajectory. And the predator caught mid-lunge, it hesitates, blinks, misses. It's too late. The herd is already halfway across the river before the predator regains its senses. You don't move. You don't speak. You just watch the mist drift low and slow like smoke after a shot. And you realize that was not random. That was tactical. Historians still debate how sophisticated dinosaur group behavior really was. Did they coordinate use vocal signals? Visual cues? Maybe. But what if one of their most reliable tools, one of their oldest, wasn't sound at all? What if it was a sneeze? You jot down in your muddy, water-warped notebook, color-coded sneeze equals survival alert. You think about how modern animals sound. Alarms, birds cry out, deer, stomp and snort, monkeys scream. But those signals carry a cost. They draw attention. But a colored sneeze. That's quick. Subtle. Visual. Especially effective when you're surrounded by others who already know what it means. Odd fact, cuttlefish can change color across different parts of their body independently, using that to send mixed signals to predators and mates. Why couldn't hadrosaurs or any dinosaur project messages the same way? Not with skin, but with breath. You hike down from the ridge following the herd's path. The red mist has mostly dissipated, but you find traces of it along the riverbank, on leaves, on rocks, even in the muddy trail of footprints. It's faint, but it's there. A breadcrumb trail left by a body reacting to fear the only way it could. You crouch near the largest splash zone where the sneeze must have originated. The riverbank is still sticky from rain, but there's a pattern here, fan-like, radial, symmetrical. A perfect projection. You gently scrape a sample with a leaf, turning it in the light. The residue catches faint glimmers of copper and crimson. Adrenaline. Hemoglobin traces. You're no chemist, but you're starting to believe this wasn't just a reflex. This was an evolved response. You walk farther along the river, tracing the herd's route. You find more signs, subtler this time. Pale yellow marks on shrubs. A misty sheen on a mossy trunk. Each spot seems to align with a directional change, like sneeze turn signals guiding the group. And that's when it clicks. Maybe the first colored sneeze was an accident, a freak mix of pigment and mucus triggered by stress, but it worked. It startled a predator. It bought seconds. Seconds became survival. Survival became genes. And over time, evolution didn't just keep it, it refined it. You write the sneeze that saved a species, and you mean it. Because when your world is filled with teeth and claws and thunder from above, any edge, no matter how wet or weird, becomes the difference between being remembered or being a red smudge in the mud. You sit there, knees in the dirt, thinking about what that one sneeze set in motion. Not just color, not just signal, but strategy. Breath became banner, snot became shield. And what started as a bodily function became a battle cry. You close your notebook. You look up at the sun piercing the trees. And for a moment, the world feels like it's still carrying that sneeze in the wind. You've made it full circle. Back to the edge of that first clearing. Back to Luma. She stands where you left her. Older now, slower maybe, though you can't say for sure. The light around her is softer today, filtered through high clouds and the drifting haze of late afternoon. She exhales a long, steady breath. No mist, no scent, just silence. Around her, the world hums. Not with roars, not with movement, with breath, with wind in the ferns, with the memory of all those sneezes that came before. You settle into the dirt one last time, knees aching, notebook worn to the edge of collapse, and watch as another corythosaur ambles up beside her. They touch snouts gently. Then one lets out a soft sneeze. The mist is faint, almost imperceptible. A pale blue swirl that dances for only a moment before vanishing into the warmth. Nothing aggressive, nothing performative, just a whisper. You almost miss it. But that's the point. Because what you've seen across this whole strange journey is not chaos, it's choreography. Signals stitched into breath. Warnings painted into fog. Comfort exhaled as colors in the air. What started as a single surprising sneeze has bloomed into 1,000 meanings. Defense, heat, desire, alarm, ritual, memory. Historians still debate if dinosaurs had culture. You don't. You've seen it. In the sneezes passed between mother and calf. In the flares that scattered predators. In the synchronized expulsions during rainstorms, the fragrance fights in the forest, the glowing mucus lullabies. And now, as twilight nears, Luma lets out one more. It isn't loud, it doesn't shimmer, it simply is. And in that breath, in that barely there plume, in that single soft exhale, into the cooling evening air, you understand dinosaurs might not have spoken in words, but they spoke. Through color, through breath, through everything their bodies could push into the world. So you pack your bag, you rise slowly, you take one last look at the prints in the dirt, the fading mist in the air, and the silence they leave behind. and you whisper, "I'll remember." You turn and walk into the dusk. So did dinosaurs really sneeze in color? You followed their trails across ferns and floodplains, ducked under trees thick with spore-laden air, and watched herds communicate not through roars or claws but mist. From the first shimmering sneeze to the quiet signals passed between mates, what you've seen wasn't accident. It was language. We've watched mucus become more than just bodily function. It turned into a biological broadcast signaling temperature, danger, emotion, even identity. From bacteria glowing in nest threads to pigment-rich sprays that helped choose a mate or warn a herd sneezing became part of survival. It wasn't just gross, it was art. And no, we might never find fossilized snot, but we do find echoes, patterns in sediment, strange pigment traces, anatomical features hinting at pressurized sinuses and behavioral quirks. We find living parallels, flamingos feeding color to their young lizards, communicating through scent birds, exhaling mist to cool themselves down. So maybe it's not so far-fetched. Maybe once long ago sneezes were bright and meaningful and everywhere. Not everything leaves a bone. Some things only leave stories. And this story about a world that breathed in color and exhaled connection is one of them. You don't need to believe it all. Just breathe out and imagine.